Hello, my name is Molly Huber, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Minnesota Digital Library. I'm joined today by Gabriel Galson and Ariadna Manas. We're going to be talking to you today about bridging borders, implementing the rightstatements.org and Creative Commons standards in cultural heritage aggregators. Next slide, please. So, right statements were developed to provide standardized, easy-to-read information about related to the status of cultural heritage of works available online. This project started off as a collaboration between Europeana and the Digital Public Library of America, which are both large-scale aggregators. This group has now grown to about 5 aggregators internationally, including Trove, the National Digital Library of India, and other organizations. Representatives from each organization comprise a steering committee that makes recommendations and decisions for the whole consortium. In addition to that, members of the aggregators gather in specific working groups. There's a statements working group, which was in charge of defining the statements, and a technical working group, which was responsible for their technical implementation. There are some challenges to this type of organization. There's a diversity of priorities, but this diversity also is the strength of the organization. The standard needs to be global for it to be meaningful and widely adopted. So briefly, the 12 statements developed by the consortium describe a variety of rights statuses falling into 3 main categories. Sorry, I forgot to say to advance the slide. Thank you, Gabriel. The first, in copyright, covers the instances when an item is in copyright, including when there is an exception for non-commercial or educational use, or when the item is an orphan work held in a collection in the European Union. The second category, no copyright, addresses the other side of the coin, when something is out of copyright, specifically according to the laws of the United States, but also when there may be legal or contractual restrictions on its use, even though the copyright has expired. Finally, and this is a little more broad of a category in some ways, there's the other category, which covers situations where the copyright status is not clear. Copyright undetermined means that one or more key pieces of information needed to definitively determine the copyright status are missing. No known copyright means you're pretty sure the item is not in copyright, but again, you are missing one or more key pieces of information that will allow you to say that for certain. And copyright not evaluated means that although you have evaluated the work and your ability to share it, you have not yet made a copyright determination. Each of these statements with full explanatory language are available at rightstatements.org. Next slide, please. There are some similarities, but also some very key differences between right statements and Creative Commons licenses. Right statements are descriptive metadata. They're not legally binding, and they're not licenses. They can be applied by anyone, and they can be updated as more information becomes available. Creative Commons licenses are actually licenses and can be only applied by the copyright holder. Where they are similar is that both help in sharing. Right statements provide standardized information that assists users in determining what they can and cannot do with a given item. They do not have to be assigned by the copyright holder, but can be assigned by the owner of the physical item and updated as more information becomes available. Again, they are descriptive metadata and not legally binding. They are not licenses. Creative Commons licenses are licenses, as I said. They are legally binding. They also provide information about what you can and cannot do with an item, but they can only be applied by the copyright holder. And once applied, they cannot be revoked. They last as long as the copyright on the item does. The best practice is to use one or the other. And I think it's important to note that right statements were not designed to supplant or be used at the same time as Creative Commons licenses. It is our practice to encourage adopters to use Creative Commons licenses whenever possible. Next slide, please. The Digital Public Library of America began a big push for its contributors, of which the Minnesota Digital Library is one, to use both right statements and Creative Commons statements where applicable a number of years ago. They aggregate millions and millions of items from hubs all over the United States, and they wanted using these statements would help clean up the wide variety of information shared in the right statement field, much of which did not provide any meaningful information about what could be done with the item that was there. The old statements had a lot of gatekeeping, frequently saying that permission must be sought from the contributor, even if the collections owner was not actually the rights holder. Even if a given rights statement was more permissive, it was seldom informative in a useful way. Most often, the statement would say something along the lines of, well, copyright laws may apply, use at your own risk, kind of, but they weren't really giving any information about the actual status or whether it could be used. So many hubs worked with their contributors and their own collections to assign rights statements and Creative Commons licenses, with the end result that there is enough material with statements or licenses that a How Can I Use It facet, similar to the one used by Europeana, is now available on the DPLA website. Now users can search specifically for things that are free to use, whether because they are out of copyright or CC licensed, and not have to worry about whether they are in violation of the law. Next slide, please. On a local level, hosting hubs such as the Minnesota Digital Library, or MDL as we call ourselves, were also able to implement a search facet related to an item's copyright status. This faceting builds on the standardized rights statements and, for us less frequent due to the nature of the materials we work with, Creative Commons licenses assigned to the over 58,000 items in our hosted collection. We built new fields into our metadata structure to allow for the display of rights statements or the Creative Commons icon right near the top of each record, as you can see in this example here. Plus, lower down, and that's what you see to the right of the slide, a field with the statement or license itself, and as well as the full text. The link also takes you to the statement page on rightstatements.org or to the Creative Commons page. With that information available for most records in our collection, we were able to set up the search facet so that users can search by rights status and ability to use. The MDL search actually reflects the statements used, as you can see to the left, rather than general categories like DPLA. If an item does not have a standardized statement or license applied, it does not appear in the search. Minnesota Digital Library staff provides rights information training to each of our contributors and to other libraries, archives, and cultural heritage organizations if they are interested, in group settings and one-on-one. We have also developed training videos and tools, such as a rights guide and rights statements assignment workflow, which is updated each year. All of these are available via our website, mndigital.org. And now I'm going to turn it over to Gabriel.
Thanks, Molly. This is Gabe Gulson. I'm a technology projects librarian at Temple University in Philadelphia, United States, and I co-chair the DPLA's Rights Statements Working Group. Now we're going to survey how standards like Creative Commons and rightstatements.org can enhance the usability and functionality of cultural heritage aggregators. These enhancements are made possible by the statement's machine readability. Like Creative Commons licenses, they've been designed for both human users and machine users, like search engines and APIs. They conform to semantic web technology, fit into the RDF framework, and are URI-based. They are also available in multiple international languages, from Spanish to English to Hindi to Catalan and more. The interoperability of standardized rights statements encourages and enables collaborative work and enhances our ability to work at scale and across systems. In both individual repositories and aggregators, rights metadata forms the technological foundation of various interface features, most notably facets, buttons, and pop-ups. Let's take a closer look at the DPLA How Can I Use It facet that Molly mentioned. It groups both Creative Commons licenses and rightstatements.org statements into 5 categories. Through the DPLA API and harvest process, the 19 standardized statements included are grouped into categories like unlimited reuse, which includes both CC licenses like CC0 and rights statements like no copyright. Non-standard rights statements go into the unspecified rights status category. These categories are designed to be easily comprehensible to users unfamiliar with the intricacies of digital copyright. Pop-up eye icons within the facet lead to an overview of what's within the category and outline how the included items can be reused. Clicking this pop-up takes users to a page providing a comprehensive intro to statements and licenses and an exact account of which statements feed into which categories. Thus, a gradient of increasingly detailed information is available, making the facet serve both copyright novices and experts. All these features are based on standardized rights statement metadata. On individual item pages in DPLA, other metadata-based features are utilized. For example, each statement or license renders as a button under the item in DPLA. When clicked, these take one to the appropriate rightstatements.org page for the full info. The human readable version of each URI-based statement, rather than the URI string itself, is displayed on the page. How is the How Can I Use It facet designed? First, the rights statements working group looked at other already implemented rights facets, in particular implementations from Creative Commons Search, Europeana, Bing, and Google. There are a variety of approaches, from category-based to statement and license specific. All provide benefit, but there's no perfect approach at the end of the day. We tried, like others, to pull features from a variety of sources. Creative Commons Search's facet was excellent and comprehensive, but more granular and complex than could be implemented in DPLA. Google's was surprisingly useless, while Bing's was decent with some sensible features that we actually ended up adapting. We drew most directly on Europeana's category-based approach. However, we created our own categories, rewrote category titles, and adjusted the overall structure. Another example of rightstatements.org enabled interoperability is the ongoing focus on integrating images from aggregators like DPLA and Europeana into Wikimedia Commons, and by extension, Wikipedia. Wikimedia Commons only accepts free-to-reuse items. Rightstatements.org metadata complements Creative Commons licenses by dramatically expanding the pool of allowable content. Once added to Wikimedia Commons, these images can be integrated into appropriate Wikipedia articles, driving traffic back to the aggregator, which in turn enables the discovery and reuse of similar items. In a single year, a DPLA initiative to add images to Wikimedia en masse drove over 500,000 new aggregator visits. And here's an example of a DPLA item integrated into Wikipedia via Wikimedia Commons. It's been excavated from the aggregator and providing maximum benefit to the world. Through rightstatements.org and Creative Commons, many other features are possible. The statement buttons you see in DPLA have been incorporated into other standalone systems such as Samvera and DSpace, and could be integrated into many more. An ongoing integration of Creative Commons Search into WordPress lets WordPress users retrieve reusable images directly through the platform as they build websites, a huge convenience for web designers. Down the line, the same could be done with items bearing rightstatements.org metadata. Other URI-based licenses and standards could hypothetically also be incorporated into the features we've covered. Open source software licenses are just one example. Local context or LC statements are another. The DPLA's Right Statements Working Group is engaged in an ongoing collaboration with local contexts, an organization that maintains the LC statements. Through a technical framework similar to that underlying Creative Commons, these communicate usage concerns related to items created or stewarded by indigenous groups. They serve as an essential supplement to legally defined usage restrictions, which in many cases complicate or contravene culturally based usage guidelines defined by indigenous groups. The Right Statements Working Group is hoping to integrate these into the How Can I Use It facet, or alternatively to display them through a comparable interface feature. Through APIs that can be called based on standardized right statement metadata, such as DPLAs, many possibilities present themselves. For example, external applications or plugins based on Europeana or DPLA items can be constructed, enabling further item reuse. So I'm going to turn it over to Ariadna.
Thank you very much. So hi everyone, my name is Ariadna Matas and I work as a policy advisor for the Europeana Foundation. And I wanted to tell you a little bit of how all this looks like in the Europeana ecosystem. So at Europeana, we also rely on a number of right statements and all of the Creative Commons licenses and the two Creative Commons tools as options that those who provide data to Europeana can choose from when submitting a digital object that will be made available by Europeana. So like you see in the image, similarly to the examples that were shown just before, there's the digital object accompanied by a right statement or a Creative Commons license or tool just below the digital object, and then the metadata that is made available under the terms of CC0. providing this rights information in a standardized form from amongst the options that we provide is a mandatory field when submitting data to Europeana. So digital objects will always be shown alongside this rights statement, and there's additional metadata fields that data providers can use to provide specificities around rights that they might think are important for the user of future user of the content. But there's always a standardized piece of information that we make available. From the user perspective, next slide, please. From the user perspective, when the user comes into Europeana, there's first a search filter that they can use, which also groups rights statements by categories under the "Can I use this?" question. So there's 3 categories right now. And they can go into more detail if they're familiar enough with rights statements and the Creative Commons licenses and tools. They can make a specific search by rights statement or Creative Commons license or tool. There's also next slide, please. There's also on top of the button for the rights statement, if they hover over the button, there's a pop-up that gives a little bit of information about that particular rights statement. And there's always by clicking the button, people can go into the complete license or rights statement description. However, we've been seeing that over the years, data providers, so cultural heritage institutions sharing data with Europeana, still make some mistakes, sometimes a lot of mistakes when choosing the rights statement. And that choice is for the data provider to make, because the data provider, so the cultural heritage institution that has this data in the collection, is the one that knows best the copyright story behind that image. So we wouldn't be able to make that choice for them. So it's very important that they are the ones identifying the most accurate rights statement for the particular digital object. However, from the little information we have, we still see that sometimes material that is clearly in the public domain is marked with a CC license, or vice versa, material that is still in copyright is marked as being in the public domain. So we're making efforts to try to correct these mistakes, mostly from the perspective of awareness raising and capacity building. So next slide, please. So the Europeana, similarly to what we heard about the DPLA, the Europeana initiative has one of the pillars, which is a network association that is organized around communities, working groups, task forces. And one of the communities is the copyright community, which is steered by the group of people that you see in the image. And from this copyright community, we make efforts to develop materials to guide those institutions that share data with Europeana into how to make an accurate choice for a rights statement, but also develop materials that might be useful for other cultural heritage institutions when sharing data via their own platforms. So some examples of the materials that we develop, next slide please, are some training modules on how to select an accurate rights statement, guidelines on how to organize the workflows within a cultural heritage organization to best manage copyright. And then we also set up regular calls, which we call office hours. So an open space that people in the community can come in to ask questions about the specific topic that monthly call is about, hopefully to find solutions that others have already explored and benefit from bringing all this knowledge together. Next slide, please. In terms of what things look like for us in the coming months and years, so Europeana is now responsible as part of a consortium for deploying what is called the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. This is an initiative by the European Commission as part of the European Strategy for Data that tries to ensure that data is as available and as reusable as possible, because it has enormous benefits in many ways. So there's data spaces for various types of information, a health data space, a skills data space, and Europeana contributes to the deployment of the data space for cultural heritage. As we develop such a data space, we are considering and kind of reconsidering and reopening various discussions, among which how data should be governed in that data space. And one of the things that we want to look into is the extent to which rights statements are working as well as they should. So some of the questions that we will be asking ourselves in the coming months is, do the data providers who will be participating in the data space need additional right statements, or would they benefit from right statements providing additional conditions? Or should we explore using other standards that do not talk about copyright, but about other types of legal or ethical considerations, like local context that Gabriel was sharing just now, or standards that could help us express conditions in relation to privacy and data protection? So these are just open questions that we'll be looking into. And of course, it would be a discussion within Europeana. Depending on the results, we would be then checking with colleagues and peers in other aggregation systems and the people behind the development of right statements, or maybe the CC community as well. So this was just to share a little bit of where we are now in the use of right statements and what's ahead for us. Maybe the last slide that I wanted to share is also building upon what Molly was saying at the beginning on how the Right Statements Consortium works. If you can go to the previous slide, thank you. So Gabriel and Molly and I and some other colleagues are part of a third working group that was created within the Right Statements Consortium, which is the implementation working group. So within the Right Statements Consortium, we kind of saw that the statements are there, their technical implementation functions, and what we feel that many aggregators and cultural heritage institutions need now is more guidance on how to make them work at its best. And even though there's the DPLA working group and the Urbana copyright community and other groups that exchange knowledge at the regional and national level, we feel that the Right Statements Consortium can also take a role in building upon these efforts to guide implementation internationally for other aggregators that are not connected to a particular community. So this implementation working group has started to look into some possible measures that we could take, which could be around developing training resources or developing or fostering a bit of an exchange perhaps in the form of a network of adopters to share best practice and success stories that other people can learn from. So that's where where things are at the moment, and I think that's all from my side. So thank you all for your attention. Our contact details are in this slide, and we will be very happy to hear from all of you any feedback or questions that you might have on this topic. Thank you very much.